everyone. Welcome to the Young Men Podcast, where youngins such as ourselves dive into the inner workings of our minds. I'm your host, Josh Richardson, and I'm here with my co-host and good friend, Connor Stiles. Connor is youngins, an appropriate description for people our age, considering we're 26 years old.
I think so. I mean, it's all really just a matter of perspective. There's people that are a lot older than us that I think probably think that we're still extremely young, but I think most kids would probably think we're really old. I remember growing up in high school and even younger than that, I always kind of thought 26 sounded really old. I mean, most 26-year-olds are out of college and actually working, so that just seemed so old at that point.
Yep, so what I'm hearing is as long as we have people older than us, then we can still use the title youngins. And as long as we have people younger than us, then we can still consider ourselves wise. So
yeah, I think
good.
that sounds right.
All right, so the title of the podcast works, hopefully, until we get into our late 90s, and then maybe we'll have to change it. But let me just introduce the podcast for everybody else, what we hope it's going to be for ourselves and for everyone else. We initially created this podcast as a way to journal our life experiences. Connor, you and I met back in 2014. We lived together for 5 years. We became really good friends. We also created a lot of other good friends while we were at school, and we want to include them in our journaling experience. So as the show continues, we're going to be bringing on a lot of those friends that we made through school to be interviewing them about various topics. And we're hoping that as we all move through life, we can look back on this period of our lives, our 20s, and we can remember through these videos, through these podcasts, what we were thinking and what was going on in our lives. And then hopefully we keep this podcast going for a while so that as the decades move on, we'll just kind of have an audio and visual journal of our lives as they progress. So we're going to be discussing lots of different topics. We're hoping that the topics that we discuss are relevant. Well, they are relevant to people our age. We're taking topics from things that we are thinking about, that we're worrying about, things that are on our mind. We're really hoping this will be an authentic and genuine look at people our age and you know what's going on in our noggins. And I don't think we're going to try and hide anything. I think this is going to be a pretty vulnerable look at what's going on in our lives, which I'm really excited about, and it's the way that journals should be. Connor, today our topic is what life is like after college. And this is a topic that we've talked about quite a bit as we've made that transition. And it's an interesting one because, speaking for myself here, I did spend so much of my life looking forward to college. It was like the pinnacle experience. I thought it was the end all in my young mind. And now that I'm not in college anymore and I have a career facing me, it's a little bit daunting, and it's something that I hadn't really prepared for. So we're going to dive into that. We're going to talk about some specific challenges of adulthood that we've discovered and how we're moving forward through it. So I'm just going to start us off with this question, a little bit of nostalgia here. But why was college so delightful for you and I?
I think part of it is just we really lucked out with, especially our roommates, but just the friends that we kind of made along the way. I feel like we had a very good group of people that we were surrounded by, that we lived with. We got along really well with them, and we just had fun with it. A part of it, I think, also is we were all exploring this newfound freedom that we had, first time living away from home, so we really just got to kind of explore being independent, and that combined with having really fun people to do that with, I think just made it really fun.
Well, you hit on two things that I was going to talk about as well, but the first thing that came to my mind was that independence. I just remember that like first semester of school, and I came to school a semester before you did, but I remember how bizarre it was to have total freedom and to not have anybody tell me what to do and when I needed to do it. And honestly, I lost control. Like, I remember that first year that we lived together, we were staying up on a pretty consistent basis till like 3 or 4 in the morning, and then we were waking up at 8 for
our we stayed up
8
so
and 9
late
o'clock classes. Just total abandonment of any sort of schedule or routine that we had before that our parents had kind of kept us on through high school. And it was such an amazing feeling of freedom to do whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted. And then, like you said, the friends that we made, we got very lucky. And I remember the first term when I wasn't living with you and I had random roommates and how bad they were. And then I remember when you and I became roommates, and then the other guys that were living with us at the time, I just remember being so grateful for the type of people that you were and the friendships that we made, because it completely changed our college experience. Did you enjoy the academic side of school?
to a certain extent. I took some classes that I thought were really interesting. Astronomy was one, has nothing to do with my major, but that class and the geology class that we took together, classes like that where we had a little bit of freedom in what we were studying, I thought was enjoyable. Ironically, I don't know that I necessarily enjoyed learning about accounting. I had really amazing professors and classmates that made it enjoyable, but I would say I enjoyed the social aspects a lot more than the academic side of it.
While you were talking about accounting, I was just thinking another purpose of this podcast is for you to have a platform to throw off all of those accounting stereotypes that everybody usually associates with accounting majors. So we're going to give people a real look inside an accountant's life. But that astronomy class was really fun, but also kind of a joke. That one was in the planetarium, and I remember all the seats were reclined, and they projected the notes up on the dome, and then they turned off all the lights, and it was a morning class. And I'm like, you realize most of us are not going to be able to stay awake under these conditions. And I was right. I think there was like one or two people at the very front of the classroom who were really eager, Hermione Granger sorts of students who were paying attention. But I remember looking around the rest of the planetarium, and everybody else was completely gone, and the teachers didn't even care. I just remember they turned on the lights, and everybody just kind of woke up, and they're like, what did we talk about today? I'm pretty sure I was only awake for 3 of those classes. But and also thank you for your help in that astronomy class, because you were one of those people that stayed awake at the front of the class.
I actually had to teach myself that class because I fell asleep most of the classes. It was a 9 a.m. class, and when you're staying awake until 3 or 4 in the morning, it's tough to stay awake when the class is structured like that. So
how the devils did we even wake up on time for those classes? I get 7 hours of sleep now, and it takes me a long time to get up out of bed. And back then, when we were getting 4 hours of sleep, we hopped up, we were ready to go. So much energy. Okay, I want to start to transition into looking at adulthood, but we talked about some of the good things about college, but I do want to talk a little bit about, like, what were some of your fears in college, and I want to talk about those juxtaposed against kind of our current fears or things that preoccupy our thoughts. But let's first talk about, like, what were some difficult things about college, because it wasn't all roses.
I think one of the most difficult things about college was just the pressure from the academics. I always felt like I mean, maybe part of it is just the way that I am, but I spent so much time studying that sometimes it turns out I didn't need to study as much as I did, but I was just so afraid of failing a class, or not even failing, but just not getting the grade that I thought that I wanted to get in that class, that I just overstudied to kind of compensate for it. Um, but
And there was like a lot of comparison at school too, and um, it was always a lot of added pressure to see other people seemingly working extremely hard, harder than you, and then to feel like you were falling short in some way. So there was always that pressure of needing to
yeah,
measure up.
and something that BYU does just with, and I think it's common across a lot of colleges, but you can see where you're at in the class compared to everyone else. If you bomb a quiz, you can see that you got the lowest score in the class. Or if you do really well, you can see that you were towards the top. So I think that kind of added to the pressure is you always knew where you were at compared to your peers. So that
Now,
and
looking at
yeah.
adulthood and careers, has any of that pressure of comparison or that sense of like measuring up, has any of that translated into adulthood for you?
For my current career, I feel like there's less pressure. I feel like it's a lot more just of a team mentality. You all just want to succeed together, and you're not being consistently or constantly compared. And so I think there's less of that sort of pressure, especially since you're not always being graded on things. I mean, you might have performance reviews every quarter or something like that, but you don't have 5 assignments due that week that are being graded. So I think that takes away some of the pressure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, in my job as well, just the team mentality. It's so nice to know that other people are on your side working together instead of competing with you. So that is really nice. So Connor, if I were to ask you what is the most challenging thing about adulthood, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
I think right now, and I think at least for me, it's just the stage of life that we're in is still the dating aspect. I feel like work, I've kind of got a handle on, just the normal day-to-day life things kind of got a handle on, but it's just kind of the uncertainty still around dating that makes it the hardest for me, at least.
Yeah, and that's an interesting word, uncertainty. I think people in their 20s, people always say 20s is the golden decade. I don't know. College was amazing. It was definitely a great part of my life, and maybe it's not that way for everybody. I know a lot of people struggle through college. I want to acknowledge that, but once we left college, there was still a lot of uncertainty, and I get the sense that that uncertainty is going to continue for a while as long as there are still unresolved things in our lives. And I think maybe part of adulthood is learning how to settle into that uncertainty and live with it. And for me, I was going to say at a little different point in my life than you are, but how much money matters is one of the big stresses in my life. And planning for the future, I think before I graduated, I had a very romantic view of the future in terms of like passions or things that I wanted to do, doors that I thought were going to open, and then getting hit with this reality of money is really important. And it sounds foolish that I didn't think of it sooner. Maybe I'll blame that on the English department at our school for not preparing us for careers. But I think it largely is my fault for not even thinking about it. I was just kind of lost in school and what I was learning. I didn't even think about it. But money sucks. It really sucks. And trying to figure out ways how to practically provide for yourself, and then thinking about how you might provide for other people in the future, and the uncertainty of all of that for me has been one of the biggest challenges. And then the second thing that I was going to say also is how the social dynamic has changed once leaving college, because all of those friends that we created that were living in a very close space, and we had a lot of free time to be able to spend time with each other. There were always parties or things going on where we could meet other people. And now once you get to adulthood, it's like most of your time is locked up in your job. And where does that social bucket get filled in your life? And for me, that like isolation, spending a lot of time alone just because other people don't have time to hang out or talk as much as they did before, that's extremely difficult. And I was going to ask about that. I am curious, how have your relationships changed since leaving college? Because you were a really social person in college, and I'm just curious how that's transitioned since you've left.
Yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite parts of college, is just how close everyone is. I mean, you make friends with the people in your apartment complex that are close to you, and so whenever you want to see them, they're just a couple 100 feet away, and you can see them whenever you want. That has been tough since moving back to Meridian. I do have a handful of friends that I do stuff with that I really enjoy spending time with. But I mean, we live farther apart definitely than I live to my friends at BYU. So that's been hard, but I have kept in touch with some friends from BYU, especially a group of people that I became really close with my last year at school when I was living at Condo Row. We still try to do a call every week, and it doesn't always end up being every week because we still have other things that are going on, but we still try to connect and keep those friendships alive. So that has been actually a huge help, because I still feel like I'm good friends with those people, and staying in contact and talking with you and Josh Holtry, that has also been a lifesaver, honestly.
Yeah. And I'm really glad you have those connections. I'm glad we have our connection as well. It's just interesting how much more effort it takes to maintain those relationships. It really does take effort, because before you could just step outside and something was happening and you could go join. I am curious though, as you've gotten older and you've had like more isolation, just because your career is taking up a lot of your time, have you sort of felt yourself becoming more introverted with time and less extroverted?
I think a little bit, yeah. Especially, I mean, I'm living with my family right now, and sometimes I just feel like I need some alone time. Whereas when I was living in Provo, I never wanted alone time. I always wanted to be with people. But now it's kind of shifting to where I do sometimes feel some more introverted moments. I still generally like being with people and talking with people, but yeah, I do feel like it's shifted a little bit.
Yeah, same. And it's really interesting why it's happening, because I agree with you. In the past, alone time was not something that I wanted or needed at all, but maybe there's something tied with the stresses of adulthood or responsibilities that kind of get placed on our shoulders that kind of wear you out a little bit, maybe. And that's why you need a little bit more alone time to recharge. But, or maybe it's just something that we're acclimating to and becoming so used to that it is familiar and comfortable to us. But it's really interesting because that is kind of a worry of mine, that I become so comfortable being, living my own life, that it becomes difficult to care about other people or share my life with other people. I don't know if you've had that fear before, but like when you do get to the point when you're in a serious relationship or thinking about marriage or something like that, how difficult is it going to be to share your life with someone after living it so freely on your own for so many years?
It's definitely a concern. I think especially because the older we get, while still being single, I think the more ingrained we kind of get in our habits and the way that we live. And so I think it'll be interesting and somewhat of a challenge when we actually do end up getting married, combining your life with someone else and really kind of changing the way you live a bit. Because even right now, we kind of just still have ourselves to worry about. Like, that's the primary concern because we don't have anyone else we're truly responsible for. So I think it'll be a tough transition.
Yeah. And thank heavens that life has so much variety that we're never stuck in one rut forever. And I guess looking at that transition of merging your life with somebody else's when the time comes, it will probably be difficult, but also a good sort of challenge to learn how to do. I am interested as well. I had this idea when I was thinking about relationships and how they've changed after school, that I am more careful with how I use my social energy. And I think when we were in school together, we were so eager and willing just to socialize with everyone that we only really built deep relationships with a very few amount of people, and then we had kind of shallow friendships with everybody else. But it's interesting, as I'm getting older, I'm realizing that energy, because it's limited, I'm a lot more careful with how I spend it. And so I've gotten more comfortable saying no to like social events where there are people or things going on that maybe really aren't interesting, and I really try and find people that I really connect with and can build deep and meaningful relationships with, and try and prioritize those relationships over my other ones. Have you noticed that like shift in how you want to spend your social energy?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when I do spend time with people, it's essentially always with the same people. Whereas I feel like in college, the net of friends, I guess, was just a lot wider. And it's true, like you mentioned, you still had that core group, but the number of other people that I still did things with was still pretty large. Whereas now I feel like it's really condensed. And I'm definitely more selective in who I spend time with. I definitely say no to some gatherings more often than I used to.
Which makes us sound like hermits, almost like we're slowly becoming recluses in society and cutting ourselves off from potential friendships or relationships. But yeah, I just have noticed that over the last year or two in my life that social energy has become limited, and I am more careful about who I want to spend time with. And I think that is a natural transition. I look at people like my dad, though, and he is so, I think he was an introverted person from birth. He is so content to spend a lot of time on his own. And I want to get comfortable with spending time on my own, but I also never want to lose ability to be social with other people. And I think trying to figure out ways to still be social, even though the more money we make, the more resources we have to isolate ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, we can live in a nicer place. We don't have to live with roommates. That isolates ourselves. We can buy a nicer technology or other stuff like that, and that isolates ourselves. And so I think it'll be interesting, the older that we get and the more money that we make, how do we resist that pull to just completely isolate ourselves, and how do we maintain those social ties? Do you have like a game plan moving forward, like how you're going to fight the temptation to just turn inward and live an isolated life? Like how are you going to keep up your social ties?
I think one thing that I've always kind of wanted to do. It's definitely harder to execute, but I've always wanted to do some sort of like yearly trip with friends and have it be kind of the same people each year that we just get together with and do a trip together. And obviously that is easier to do when you're more established and have more kind of a discretionary income. Yeah. But I think just that's one thing I've always wanted to do, is just have something that we can count on every year that we do to reconnect and catch up, and hopefully still stay in contact with throughout the year and do calls and stuff like that. But I still would really like to see people in person.
Yeah, because doing calls and video calls is good, but it's just not the same as seeing people in person. I wish the government gave out grants for friend reunion trips, especially for poor people in their 20s, because, yeah, that sounds so amazing. And sometimes it's not a possibility with the amount of money that we have right now to our name. Well, let's not talk about finances right now. I think I'll start blushing, be embarrassed. Okay, so now that you are in your career, Connor, and now that we're out of college, and this future of like 30 plus years or 40 years of work is ahead of us, is that not terrifying to you? Just a life of work?
It's daunting, for sure. Especially because, I mean, you never actually know where you're going to end up. I could try to stay with Deloitte forever, and some people do that. But, I mean, there's also lots of opportunities to go other places, which might mean I need to move somewhere else. Like, there's just a lot of uncertainty, and it happens usually during busy season, which is right now for me, where I'm thinking, can I do this for 40 more years? And I don't know. It's there's, especially when I see kind of other jobs that people have where they truly just have fun every day. I mean, I'm very happy with my career choice, but right. I mean, just watching like professional athletes, I could never be a professional athlete. I don't have that skill set, but they get to play a game every day. And I know it's a lot of hard work, but I mean, I think they'd probably look at accounting and just wonder how I do what I do. But
right.
I don't know. That was kind of a tangent, but yeah, it's daunting.
Yeah, no, I think it was relevant, actually. That was a good example. And yeah, I luckily the exact path of our futures is not something we have to figure out right now. And I guess that's one of the beauties of life, is that unexpected doors open and take you on these beautiful little journeys. But it is daunting to think about a life full of work. And you look at people in the older generations who really were committed to one job their whole lives. And gratefully, and I don't know if other people our age would agree with me, but I would say gratefully that culture has started to shift, where you aren't really expected to stay in your same job. Like, we have the flexibility to move around and try different things. And that is one thing I'm really grateful for, is that we also aren't locked into a career from a very early age, because I still feel like I'm still learning about myself, and I think I will be for a long time, probably to the end of my life. So it doesn't make sense to find a job at one company doing the exact same thing for the rest of my life right now, when I still have experienced so little relatively. So I'm grateful for that flexibility that we have to find and pursue other careers. But a life of work is really daunting. So my question is, what gives your life meaning now, in the face of now that we are finished with public school, we've gone through college, now it's just our careers. Like, what's giving you meaning on the day to day?
I think for me, it's number one, building. Well, I guess everything for me is kind of building relationships, but building relationships with the people that I work with make work a lot more enjoyable. I've definitely made some good friends with the people I work with, and that makes the day to day a lot more fun. But then also the relationships with people outside of work, and I I focus on work as kind of a means to do the other things that I want to do. It's not, I don't live to work. I work to live. And so,
Nice.
yeah. Yep. Nice cliche.
I love that cliche though. It's a good one.
Yeah. And so I think of work as just kind of a way um, to provide for the lifestyle that I want to lead outside of work. And so that does make it a lot easier when I know that it's necessary, but it's helping me do the things I enjoy doing.
Yeah. So full-time work for you is not the end goal. It's relationships and living your lifestyle that you want to live. Um, do you think work could be an end goal if you find a job that aligns so perfectly with your values, that is fun and enjoyable, that you enjoy doing every day?
Yeah, I think that there is a job out there probably that is is something that I would just love doing all the time. Um, but I hope that for anyone, work doesn't become the only thing for them. I mean, I think it's always important to have relationships and things outside of work that you enjoy. Because especially when you have a family, I feel like that should always be the priority. No matter how much you love your job, I hope that you love your family more and that you look forward to doing stuff with them. And whenever you aren't working, hopefully you're able to focus on whatever you are doing, whether that's spending time with family, friends, doing stuff in the community. Hopefully you're able to leave work at work, and at least that's my goal. I don't think I ever want a job that consumes everything in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, and no matter what job you find, no matter how fulfilling it is, and how much it aligns with your values or things that you want from your life, I think you're right. Nobody at the end of their lives talks about their job as the most important thing that they ever did. It's always relationships, always relationships. So that's it's an interesting balance to try and pursue a career that you love, that brings fulfillment, but also keep relationships and things that are most important to you centered in your life. Here's some things that I think are bringing me meaning in my life post college. Learning has been a really important one for me. I think I took it for granted when I was at school, but I really enjoyed the learning aspect of school. And just because I'm not in school doesn't mean that learning can't happen still. And I really have started listening to or loving audiobooks and reading and stuff. And that's been a great way for me to use my mind to continue learning. That actually brings me a lot of fulfillment. This is the English major speaking right now, but I think books have such a beautiful way of connecting us with deeper emotions that maybe we have a hard time explaining or finding other people that can relate to those feelings. And I think books have a great way of expressing those emotions. Books almost for me are like people that I can build relationships with. That sounds crazy, and this is really tangential, but that's one important way for me to continue learning is through books. I think trying to, oh, this is a big one. In college, because I didn't really have the focus of a career, and I was kind of gliding through school, I don't think I was ever really forced to trust myself and to recognized like the gifts and the talents that I had been given, because they really weren't being used that much. And now that I'm in a position where money is so important and a career is important, I really have to learn how to like trust myself that things are going to be okay, that the gifts or the talents that I've been given, I can find a way to use those in a career that's both fulfilling and practical. And so trying to find that good fit for my personality is also something that gives my life meaning. And I think it will be a lifelong sort of pursuit. Connor, what would you say has been, to this point, the most beautiful part of post-college life?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I think on one hand, it has been really nice to get to spend more time with my family. I always had at least one sibling down in Provo while I was going to school there, and it was always fun to do stuff with them. It's nice to be around the bulk of my family more and kind of rebuild some relationships with them. I've also been able to, I feel like, focus a lot more on improving myself as well. And part of that is because there's not as many social things that I'm doing, and so I have more time, I feel like, to kind of focus on self-improvement. And so that actually has been great. I've been able to kind of get my fitness regimen back in line and more consistent. I've been able to read more. I didn't actually really read much at all during college, other than for classes.
Are you reading right now? What are you reading?
I've been reading. I'm starting the Screw Tape Letters again.
Heck yeah.
I just finished The Millionaire Next Door.
Is that like a self-help book?
It's like a financial health book. It's
gotcha.
making sure that you're, I guess, taking care of the future through finances. And then, so yeah, I've been reading more. I've been playing more music, and that side of it has actually been awesome.
I love hearing that, and I'm on the same page with you in terms of growth. And it sounds really cliche. It sounds like something that young, motivated men in their 20s would say, like, yeah, like I'm all about the self-growth or whatever and improving myself, because that's the only thing that matters. But I'm really, I'm not one of those bro types of people, but growth really has been the most beautiful part of post-college life for me. And it's not necessarily something that I like have made a vision board for or a goal for. Like, I want to grow personally. Like, that's not something that I've outright said or thought, but just by nature of where we are at in life, in the ways that we're being challenged and kind of forced to grow, growth has been so beautiful. And it makes me excited for the future. And the more uncertainty there is in our lives, the more potential for growth that we have. And it's such a beautiful thing to be able to look at where we're at right now and to be proud of ourselves for the ways in which we've grown. And I'm going to ask you, so you can be thinking about it, but ways that you've kind of matured or grown as an individual. So maybe less about like the outward skills that you've developed, but like inwardly, how have you grown? And I would say, just by nature of having challenging experiences post-college, I've really grown in empathy for other people. I'm still not perfect. I still have a lot of, selfish desires or tendency, but compassion and empathy for other people has grown because of these last 2 years of being out of school. I believe in myself more because I've had to believe in myself more. I've overcome fears, and these are not like I've made it sort of statements. These are just noticing almost sometimes imperceptible steps in the right direction for self-growth. But those are just a couple of things that I've noticed. What about you?
I think one of the things that I've been a lot better with is accepting help. I think during school, I kind of just tried to push through things and kind of take care of it on my own. But I feel like I've become more open to advice and to looking for help on my own. So I think that that's been one thing. I feel like I've also become more aware of just different circumstances that people are in. Because at BYU, I feel like we were all kind of in the same boat. I mean, people always had individual things that they were dealing with, but I'm around a lot, I guess, a lot wider variety of people now, just from work and through socializing, people at church. So I feel like I've become more aware of just the different things that people face.
So last couple of questions here, Connor. If you could leave your job right now, and let's say money wasn't really an issue, and you could go back and you could live a college lifestyle for your whole life, the college schedule, the classes, the social aspect, would you leave your job right now and go back to the college lifestyle?
That's a really tough question. If money wasn't an object and I didn't have to worry about it, I feel like I would be tempted to say yes, just because that was probably the most fun that I've ever had, was just the college experience. But at the same time, I feel like it would be hard to be in that stage of life forever. I feel like I feel a lot more fulfillment just in always having a path of progression and hope, knowing that life changes from day to day and year to year. I feel like as much as I loved that stage of life, and I feel like I would rather stay where I'm at and kind of just keep pushing forward to see what else life has in store for me. Because I hope that college wasn't my peak. Sometimes I think it was, but I hope that the best times are still to come.
Well said. I'm in exactly the same boat as you. It's always fun to look back on the best parts of our lives and to reminisce. And they always, whenever we talk about college, I feel happy thinking about those days. But in the face of the possibility of going back and living the college life forever, something feels wrong about living that way forever. And part of me doesn't like the idea of going back and doing something that I've already done before. And it's really interesting. We can look at the future and it feels daunting, like a life of uncertainty, of career work. And we get stuck in this mindset of like, the past was so much more beautiful than the future could be or will be. But then when we ask that question, like, would you go back and live in the past if you could? Maybe some people would say yes, because life is really, really challenging right now. And I totally respect that. But for where I'm at in my life right now, I would not go back to college. As wonderful as it was, there's something alluring and beautiful about facing the future. And in the lens of that question, there is something beautiful about the uncertainty, and it loses a little bit of its fear, and maybe takes on a little bit more beauty and a sense of adventure. That college was great. We've lived that part of our lives already, but what on earth does the future hold for us? Which brings me to my next question, which might be harder than the would you go back in the past question. But if you had the opportunity to go forward into the future and see what your life was like after having lived it all, and to not wade through the uncertainty like we are doing right now, would you go forward into the future?
That's, I think that's more tempting because I feel like the hardest parts of life now are not knowing what's going to happen. So I feel like if we could go into the future just to see just a quick perspective of what it ends up being like, I feel like that would be really tempting to say yes to. But on the flip side, if my future isn't as rosy as I hope that it will be, I think that would make it really tough to come back to now and have to anticipate that. So I guess in the end, I'd probably say no, I wouldn't want to see what the future is like, just because it could go either way. And at least now there's always the hope that kind of keeps you going, that it will be what you want it to be. But I feel like it would just be devastating if you look in the future and it's not quite what you thought it would be. I feel like it'd be easier to give up now, but not knowing, I think, pushes us to keep going.
I never thought about that. I was always thinking like, oh, life was positive in the future, and so going into the future would be like, yes, I did find someone that I love and want to spend the rest of my life with, and I did find a career that is amazing. But what if your life maybe had some really hard, unforeseen things happen, and then you had to go back into the present and live, and knowing that those were coming? Good glory.
Yeah, I mean, if we went into the future and we noticed that like our hand is gone or something like that, like we would come back to the present and always be thinking, when is that going to happen? Like, when am I going to lose my hand? Why am I going to lose my hand? I would probably stay away from knives for the rest of my life.
Oh,
but
gosh.
Yeah.
At what point did I decide to get those toe rings? What induced me to do it?
Yeah.
Why did I get a face tattoo? Why am I in prison? You're right. It's not like we're naive to the fact that hard things will happen in life, but something about not knowing what they're going to be, and not being afraid of them, is beautiful. Living in the present moment. And I agree with you. I would not go to the future if I had the opportunity to do it. Again, this romantic view that I have that life is kind of an adventure, and I don't always feel this way. Like you, I get so frustrated and I get so afraid by not knowing what things are going to be like in my future. But in those moments of calm, when I'm able to pull myself back into the present and view life through a little bit more of a rosy lens, the idea of hope and cool things happening, the hope that doors will open for me that will lead to unexpected but beautiful adventures, beautiful relationships and connections, and the growth, the potential for growth that's in my future. Those are just amazing things. So when we ask about the past and the future and whether we want to go back or go forward, both of us, I think, after having examined those questions, I think we're good where we're at, even though our lives are not perfect and even though we have difficult things happening in our lives. I think staying in the present is what we would want to do. Again, there are people who are going through incredibly challenging things, and maybe they would just want to hop forward, maybe not all the way to the end, but just a couple weeks or maybe a few months or maybe just a couple years to just fast forward past whatever hard thing they're going through. And that is a totally human feeling that I can definitely relate to. So maybe if you ask me in a short time in the future if I'd want to fast forward, considering whatever circumstances I'm in at the moment, then maybe I would change my answer. But right now I'm okay in the present. Okay, Connor, last question for us today before we wrap up. If you could go back in time and give someone who is in their last year of college and they're on the precipice of ending school and starting their career, what advice would you give that person?
Oh, man. I feel like the best thing I could tell them would just be to live in the present. You'll have enough time to worry about your career and working when it comes, but just enjoy being in that environment, be content with where you're at. And I mean, always look for improvement, but just really live in the moment and enjoy that year, because life changes a lot after you graduate and do start working. So I feel like you just need to soak it up and focus on the people around you while they're there.
Yeah, I would agree. I had written down live in the present as one of the pieces of advice that I would give someone at that stage in their life, which I think is advice that we were given as well when we were at that stage. I remember people saying that a lot, like live in the present, enjoy college, because no other time in life is going to be like school. But I would also, I think another piece of advice that I would give is just do whatever you can to learn your gifts and your strengths right now, and learn how to love yourself. There was a lot of validation that came via just having friends around you or receiving good grades and stuff like that. And again, I really didn't have to do that much self-examination in college, and now confronted with the uncertainty of future and having to learn those things, they've been beautiful lessons, and learning how to trust myself has been really valuable. But I would say start sooner, so that way when you get to these points of uncertainty in your career, you're not going to freak out, and you're going to say, I've been given gifts, I've been given good qualities, and I trust that doors are going to open for me to use those things and create a beautiful sort of story for my life. So learn to see the good parts of yourself, and really learn to love those things is what I would say. Well, Connor, that concludes our very first episode of the Young Men Podcast, and hopefully that gives our listeners and others an idea of what the podcast is going to be about. But again, we're just going to take topics that are on our minds and discuss them in each episode. And the podcast episodes could be really funny. They could be very serious. My guess is they're going to be a mixture of both most times. And as we authentically and genuinely look at what's going on in our lives, and we're excited because we have some things planned for the future where we're going to bring on some of our friends from college who are women who we became really good friends with. And we're going to be talking about relationships and how women view relationships for people our age versus how men see them. And we're going to have a pretty honest and genuine discussion about that. We're going to talk about other fears like balding, and we're going to talk about a lot of different topics that hopefully are relevant to other people. But Connor, thanks for sitting with me for this podcast, answering those questions, and thank you for your humor and authenticity as always, and talking about life and life's challenges.
Thank you. I'm really excited for this and all the podcasts we'll do moving forward.
This is only the beginning. Louis, my friend, this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I think I got that quote wrong, but Casablanca, great movie.